I'd like to welcome you to the place. It's a place for intellectual honesty, spiritual honesty, and scriptural honesty. And my wife and I are tickled pink, to say the least, to have two guests tonight. One would be Greg Brahe, and the other Wiliam Torres. And both of these gentlemen are exceptionally kind, brilliant, and the kind of people that you just want to have in your life. And so we do applaud you guys much in every way, and thank you guys for coming our way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to start out by stating a couple of things. Greg is actually a biologist, and he has a background that's quite extensive. And this is something that we need to pay attention to tonight, because I think that we're going to see a demonstration tonight of how various people from various backgrounds, that is, disciplines of science, might speak differently on different issues. And this is going to be possibly a wonderful time to see the contrast. We also have Wiliam Torres. He's a professor there at one of the universities in Colombia, and his background is in computer science. And he is a software engineer, and so we are so fortunate to have both of you guys. And so I'd like to hear, first of all, from Greg. Just talk to us for a moment and let people know how you sound and what you're all about. Would you do that for us?
Sure. I'm more than happy to. Well, my name is Greg Brahe. I live in Wisconsin, born and raised here or still live in the city I was raised in. I've been excited to be on the show. This is my first time doing something like this, and it's a big thrill to me to be out there. I personally view topics like this to be some of the most important topics that we can discuss, and I have been very active in doing that, mainly online and in personal conversations. So I'm very excited to be able to branch out to a wider audience here.
Well, that's wonderful. I hope that this discussion will be as frugal as most of your discussions are. I've seen many of your comments, and they have been just really exciting comments. Wiliam, tell us a little bit about yourself. Introduce yourself. Also, I didn't go full circle. I wanted you guys to speak for yourselves on the subject of you, and so introduce yourself to the audience also.
Well, hi, my name is Wiliam Caicedo Torres. I'm from Colombia. This is a South American country. I live in a city, it's Cartagena, which is called Cartagena. It's a city, little city. I'm very excited to be here tonight. It's my first time in this kind of show, or doing this kind of stuff. Well, I'm a Christian since 99 or something, but all my life I've been interested in the spirituality and whether or not there's a God out there that cares for me. And I think that God is very important in my life right now. On the other hand, I'm a software engineer, as you just said it. I also teach in a local university, a couple of classes, and very excited to be here, being a part of all of this tonight.
Well, we're so thankful to have you here. Honey, why don't you say a couple of things?
Well, I just want to let the audience know, and I'm sure if you've ever tuned into one of our shows, you know the type of format that we have, and it's a place of respect. And as my husband said earlier, this intellectual honesty. And if you, believe in the all of Scripture or some of Scripture, we go for scriptural honesty and spiritual honesty. And we know that we will get that tonight. And we are people that do not throw around ad hominems. We don't, try to make anyone look bad. We don't come with, preconceived ideas about someone or let, personal biases get in the way of others and their thoughts. And everyone that comes to this table of discussion is very important to us and also the audience. So we just do want to welcome you again, and we respect each of you, and I'm sure our audience does as well.
I think this is going to be, and I'm getting ready to let you guys out of the gate because I think that you guys are going to have this wonderful discussion, but I want to make a couple of points here, and I applaud what my wife is saying about respect. I think that we need this table of discussion that allows for atheists, theists, Gnostics, agnostics to come together and reason without condemnation and with a feeling as if we can talk and yet at the same time listen. And I think that needs to be stressed because so many times you have an atheist or a theist, they get together and it's monologue to monologue, and it's never true discourse. It's never really dialogue at all. And this is the thing that we want to fight hard to have here tonight is real discussion. Lots of listening, lots of opinions, etc., simply putting things on the table. Now, I need to state this, and Greg, correct me if I'm wrong. Now, you used to be a theist, is that correct?
Yes, I was raised with a very simple Christian, non-denominational background. In college, I was confirmed a Catholic, and through the last several years, I have shed my faith entirely. I now am an atheist in every respect of the word.
Okay. Now, you did move from the point of view of theism into deism first. Is that correct?
Yeah, that actually, and when I say I was confirmed as a Catholic, that was when I really started searching through for faith and really trying to find it instead of just taking what was given to me. And that was, even though I went through the confirmation process, when I re-examined down the road, it was more of a deism that I transitioned through at that point before I shed that entirely.
Right. And then you went from deism into atheism, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Are you considered to be an anti-theist?
I guess it depends on how you define theist.
I agree.
There are certainly some theologies that I'm very strongly against, but generally speaking, I do advocate for atheism. I am a evangelical, if that word is appropriate to use in this context, but
yeah.
I very much believe in the freedom of religion and allowing people to hold their own beliefs as they see fit. And I feel it is the only right thing to do is to discuss things like this, and hopefully that through discussions like one that we're going to have today, everybody can grow in it.
Right.
I don't come into this expecting to convince both of you to drop your theism entirely and walk away from it, but I'm hoping that we can come up with a greater understanding of one another, and maybe come to some new revelations.
Yeah, that's wonderful. We applaud that. Wiliam, do you consider yourself to be a theist?
Well, sure. I think that comes with a title, Christian title, the theism. But yep, I definitely believe in a creator God. I definitely believe that this creator God wants to have a personal relationship with everyone. I'm a Christian, but I guess that I'm not your typical Christian, or maybe the mainstream Christian type. But definitely a theist, definitely.
Wiliam, well, what separates you from the mainstream Christian?
Excuse me, I couldn't hear that.
What separates you from what you call the mainstream Christian?
Okay. there are several things. I go to a pretty conservative church, but there are things that are possibly no one else shares there with me. For example, I do not believe in eternal damnation or eternal torment in hell. I think that God is perfectly capable to forgive without a blood sacrifice. And I believe that He is there loving everyone. Maybe you can be good, you can be not a good person, but anyways, He still loves you. And I'm aware that that is not what every type of Christianity or believes. So that's what I think. I'm not your regular Christian.
Okay, now this question is for both of you, and I've listened to arguments on both sides of the fence, and there are maybe people out there who are very evangelical, that is, in their atheism. For instance, Greg, I think that you would probably consider Christopher Hitchens. He was an evangelical atheist. Would you construe him to be that?
Yes.
Yeah,
certainly.
In my opinion, he was a wonderful, wonderful individual. I wish I could have had a chance to chat with him. Also, when I look into the life of Richard Dawkins, now he has a similar background to yours, and I applaud him much in every way. And I find that he also is quite evangelical in his atheism, which I do applaud that. I think that if you are going to take a position, you certainly need to do something about it, especially if you feel as if people are trapped in something that's not reasonable, and I can applaud that. But I have several questions, and I will ask them during the course of this event tonight. But I guess my first question has to do with people like Richard Dawkins, and also not just people of atheism, but my question has to do with people of theism. Why are so many people practicing outside of their discipline? In other words, if I talk to Richard Dawkins, he has no clue as to what the Greek and the Hebrew manuscripts say. He can't read either one. Is it good science for any scientist to approach manuscripts or manuscript evidence who doesn't have any kind of logical way of looking at primary information? Is that good science or a good practice or a good method?
Lee, would you like to
Yeah.
take this one right away?
Okay.
I can.
Go ahead, Greg. Go ahead.
Okay. I think that in the cases of Richard Dawkins specifically, I'll use him as an example. I know Christopher Hitchens is a journalist, so his field is not quite as specific, but Richard Dawkins is an evolutionary biologist that I don't know if he still teaches, but he was from Oxford University in England. And as such, he's one of the most respected evolutionary biologists in his field, or at least one of the most famous, probably because of what he does outside of his field, but also due to some of the books that he's written, like The Blind Watchmaker. It's a fantastic piece that explains how evolution can go on and create the appearance of intelligent design without having anything actually intelligent behind it. But as such, he's an expert in that field. He's very, very focused. And Dr. Jones, I think that the same would be true of your field, that if you and Richard Dawkins were to sit down and have a conversation together and only talk about the ancient translation, or the translations of the ancient texts of Scripture, it's similar to me talking to my 18-month-old about basically anything. So unfortunately, you will have areas where what you are an expert in does not overlap with everything else. But we're not at a point in time now. There's simply too much knowledge, too much information out there where anybody can know everything that there is to know on a subject, and we have to trust one another's expertise and our opinions to get through there. But it's as you look at things like Richard Dawkins talking outside of his subject area, it's because they're related very strongly. He may not know what the actual scriptures do say, but he does know how people interpret it and how it's used. So that is what he can speak to. And even if he's wrong as to what it does say, as long as he's sitting the main understanding that the world has, or that most of the people have, he can lend his own expertise as light being reflected on that subject.
Well, when I think about what Dawkins is doing, because in translation models and theories today, in theology, what we have extant, and I'm talking about what we have to date, we have something that's comparable to flat earth science textbooks in theology. And so if I were someone who wanted to argue against scientific finds and I kept using the meta-language, if you will, of flat earth science textbooks, would that be a rational argument at all? My point is, Richard Dawkins, I respect him dearly, but yet at the same time, he's not speaking efficiently about the read at all. It's like he's still parked back in that mindset of religion, because all of the translators have been people who have signed contracts to keep tradition alive. And it's unfortunate, but it's reality. And those people who are actually linguists like myself, translators like myself, we know that there is a long ways to go, that is, in talking to religious people about what the text actually says. And I would hope at some point that people like Richard Dawkins could respect the ideas of the finds, that is, the linguistic finds. And we're not talking about theology here, we're talking about linguistic science. At some point, would it be good for Richard Dawkins and people like him to respect the finds of linguistics, the linguistic science part of this discussion about God?
I'd actually imagine that from people like Richard Dawkins, you're going to get less resistance to linguistic changes and new interpretations, as long as there's hard evidence for, or justification for, new translations of Scripture, than you will for most of the religious people that you talk to about it. I think that there's a new translation coming out now that's taking away some of the gender specificity in the translation from, I believe, the Greek scriptures, and there's a huge uproar going on in the churches because the parts where it talks about men are being translated to people, because it was not quite so male. I might be thinking the Hebrew one, but I had read about that, and that I think the general scientist, as long as you can give them justification, is going to say, that makes sense. Okay. Whereas other people who have based their lives and their values on the words in this book, if you change anything, it calls into question the authenticity and the integrity of that book and their entire life before that.
See, there's really several debates here. There is the church's position, and they are trying to defend a theology rather than what the text says. In other words, they're not trying to be an entity that represents an accurate model of what, let's say, the Apostle Paul might have stated or anything like that. And so from the standpoint of what the text does say as opposed to what it doesn't say, and looking at the finds that we do have in that field of science, I would like to at some point see atheists addressing some of those those different ideas there. That would be good. Wiliam, I want you to get involved in the conversation. What are your thoughts concerning why the church hasn't dealt with linguistic science? To me, I think that the church at large is refusing, and we're getting ready to talk a lot about science, because in many universities it's almost like people want to use the Bible as a science book. And I'm using a bit of hyperbole here to make a point, but it's like everything that you do in a university classroom has to be buttressed by the Bible. Why do you feel like that's true in theism or in the church?
Well, there's something I would like to say first. There's this quote by John Calvin that goes something like, the Bible is not a science book. If you want to learn sciences, go anywhere else. The Bible is not a science book. And I think that many of our mistakes, historical mistakes, are particularly linked with that, with this assumption that the Bible is a science book. It is not. The Bible is a very interesting book in my view, of course, but it's metaphysical in nature. The Holy Spirit seems not to be, seems not to care about the scientific view of things, like being scientifically correct, but spiritually or morally correct in some way. But before I go a little bit deeper in that matter, I would like to talk about Richard Dawkins first. I think, to be fair, I think that it's not necessary for him to be an expert in Greek or ancient languages in order to criticize a religion, or criticize a book, criticize the Bible. Because for me, in order to be convinced by the Bible, I don't have to know Greek, ancient Greek, for example. I think that a very honest case can be built based on the translations we have today. I'm not arguing that the translations are 100% accurate or what they should be, but what I'm saying is that what is available right now for us is enough to go to certain conclusions. And I think that he is able, as a layman in linguistics, for example, to criticize those conclusions. But to attack a theory, or to attack, not a theory, religion in this case, there is a very easy way to do it. For example, you go to the most extreme elements of the religion, and you criticize them, and then you assume that everyone else is like those elements. Yeah. So that I have to say that we are making this way easy for him, because I have to admit that we have a lot of nonsense that we are preaching. But hey, that's the way it is, unfortunately. But okay, I would like to talk about science and religion, and how there is a connection between them. I think that science and religion answer to different things, and they are not at odds with each other. And I think that's a very important thing to realize, because if the Bible is not a science book, if the Bible is not meant to be a scientific treaty, if the Bible is meant, or any sacred book is meant to talk about morality, the foundations of morality, and a God that is trying to make contact with us, then I can criticize it, because for it not being scientifically accurate. I don't know if I can communicate what I'm trying to say effectively. What do you think about it, Greg?
I thought you made a couple of fantastic points. Specifically, when you mentioned that Richard Dawkins doesn't need to be an expert on the linguistics because most Christians are not experts on linguistics. We all have to trust the experts, like you, Dr. Jones, and hopefully you can continue to improve. I think that is one thing that science has been fantastic at in human history, and the scientific method is a method of improving, of taking what we know and eliminating that which is incorrect to help us zero in on what is correct. And that's an important thing. I loved your point about easy targets too. That you're right. It is, and Richard Dawkins has made that especially famous, is attacking the worst of religion without giving as much credit to the bulk of religion. I personally think that Sam Harris has done a much better job of treating religion in a more even-handed approach and addressing everything as it is. Christopher Hitchens did a pretty good job with that as well. But it's, in my opinion, when you want to talk about the questions of science and religion, I'm sorry, I jumped points there, but I guess the conclusion I was coming to on that last one was that it's unfair for anybody to treat the worst. I mean, one thing that always gets thrown at me as an atheist is, well, Joseph Stalin and the Soviet Union was an atheist regime, and that was terrible, and millions of people died, which is true, but that's not a great example. And it's the only real fair way to address anything is to talk about every aspect of it as much as we can, the extremes and the mean, the extreme good, the extreme bad, and the whatever commonly happens. And I think that most people's common experience with religion is nothing like what you see in the news about it. You tend to only hear the incredibly good or the incredibly bad. That has something to do with our sensationalist media. But I don't know if your media is different in Colombia.
It's just the same. For example, and I'll try to speak from my experience or what I see and hear. A church maybe has this charity and is feeding, I don't know, 300 little kids. It's not going to be covered by the media. What is going to be covered by the media is, for example, a pastor that was raping a little girl, for example, and to be, as you said, trying to get an even-handed view on the situation. We should go further than that. For example, in religious circles, there's this misconception about atheists that they, for example, say that atheists are immoral and they are these people that is actively suppressing God's knowledge and this kind of stuff. I know, you know what I mean? But that is not the truth. For example, let's look at some scientists. They are very knowledgeable people, very moral people, for example, but they just happen not to believe in a God. Then I would like to know if they not believe in the God we're presenting them, or they just don't believe in any God at all. Some say that, for example, the stories that we are preaching about, the original sin and the depravity of human race, are really not logical. And I think they have a point. I think that we have not been good communicators. We, as religious people, we haven't been able to effectively communicate God's love for everyone. And the way the church have reacted to scientific discoveries and development have created a lot of skeptics, and we haven't handled that the way we should, and that has been very, very, very bad to the church and the world in general. I don't know what you think about it.
I agree at some points. I think, especially when you talk about the misconceptions of atheists, I think that both camps, and really all camps, unfortunately, when you talk about the Christian conceptions of atheists, Jews, Muslims, Hindu, anything, if it's not what you grew up around, you simply don't know it. And most of the opinions that people form on subjects like that are opinions out of ignorance. I've met some incredible people of many different religious and ethnic backgrounds. I've met some very bad people from a handful of them as well. And I've seen examples, certainly as you stated, more of the bad than the good on TV. But there's people who accomplish incredible things. I think a lot of Christians would like to think that Mahatma Gandhi was a Christian, and they absolutely forget that he was Hindu. And there's something to be said with the confirmation bias there as well. People want to believe that since theirs is obviously the right way in their opinion, that anybody who's doing something right is probably from their or in the like mind with them. But as far as the my favorite, by the way, misconceptions of atheists is that we worship Satan. That's a fun one. I get that a lot. I'm like, no, by definition, I also don't believe in Satan. That I don't worship anything. But that's a fun one. It comes up far more than you'd probably think. But it's something that I will say on the subject of the interplay between science and faith is that my lack of faith has come from my better understanding of science. That's why I transitioned from a Christian upbringing to a deistic viewpoint, is because as I learned more about the way that the world works, more and more about what I've been told about the nature of God became incompatible with what I'd learned about the world. And then as I went on and learned even more in college, it made me realize that there were really 2 points in the entire history of the universe that I couldn't explain. I couldn't attribute the creation of the universe, Big Bang, whatever started it, to anything. Scientists simply don't understand that yet. We have no idea what caused the Big Bang, what existed before it. Sure, there's theories, but it may not ever be known, may not be provable. And the other one is the origin of life. There's plenty of theories as to how that happens, but never been reproduced and difficult to test. So when I describe myself as a deist, those are the 2 things that I used to say, well, that must have been God. Maybe the Big Bang was the finger of God saying, I'm going to start right here. And boom, that was the Big Bang. And of course, God planting the seed of life and letting it grow. I understand evolution to a point where I have absolutely no doubt that it is the process by which life went from being a single self-replicating organism to what we have today. But there is still no sound theory as to exactly how that single self-replicating organism came around. And then one day it dawned on me that what I was calling or using the word God for was simply a substitution for the phrase, I don't know, or we don't know. It was the God of the gaps is what they call that.
Okay.
It was God as a mystery. And when that realization came to me, I realized that I already was an atheist. It wasn't a choice that I made. Just I realized that I didn't believe that there was a God. I simply was using the word God to describe
The unknown.
questions. I think that's the nature. With science, we may not ever know everything, and I think every question brings up, or every answer brings up more questions. But it's certainly, in my opinion, they don't answer absolutely different questions. They answer similar questions, and they have overlapped in many times. And in every time when science and religion, or science and scripture especially, have overlapped, I don't see how anybody can take anything but science as the winner of that contest.
Greg, a question for you. Do you happen to know Stephen Jay Gould's book called Non-Overlapping Magisteria?
What was that?
Stephen Jay Gould?
Title?
Stephen Jay Gould. Do you know him?
Sure, I'm aware of Stephen Jay Gould.
He wrote a book called Non-Overlapping Magisteria. Non-Overlapping Magisteria.
Oh, sure.
Have you heard about it? Okay.
Heard of it. I haven't read it.
Yeah, me neither. Just
Okay.
I read a couple things about the book on the internet, and I thought it was fascinating because it's not all time a scientist, which is an agnostic scientist, comes with this kind of conclusion. When I can understand when you say that religion and science ultimately both try to answer the same thing. But it's also true that science makes no presuppositions of meaning. It just concentrates on studying what is observable, what can be proved, or or what can be experienced in some way. Metaphysics, which is in my opinion, a better term for religion, because religion has all of this negative connotation, maybe. Metaphysics go a little bit further, because the idea is not to prove scientifically things, but to derive meaning from what we can observe. I remember this when I was like 15 years old. My family invited me to church for the first time, and I enjoyed. But when we came out of church, my cousin asked me if how was I feeling. I told her I don't think God is that simple as you picture him to be, and she just laughed at me, and but still 15 years later I feel the same way. God of the Gaps is a very unfortunate way of we theists maybe look at things. I have this phrase: my God is not the God of the gaps, but the God of the mechanisms. When I see a scientific discovery, when I hear about a new truth, material truth that has been unveiled by science, I feel into myself this feeling of awe and reverence, because my God is not only the God of what I do not know, but also the God of what I am able to know. It's so amazing when one looks at nature, and one can find an intelligibly structure for nature. When mathematical theories that have been developed like 3 or 4 years before can be experimentally proved, nature hasn't to be mathematically correct. Nature could be whatever, but we are endowed with reason and with these abilities that give us the opportunity to make sense of nature. And that for me is awesome. I don't go to God as an explanation for what I do not know. I go to God and I see Him as an amazing being because of what I'm actually able to know through science. And there is something particularly important about evolution. It is my understanding that evolution is maybe the greatest foe to religion, especially Christianity. Maybe some people see evolution that way because Genesis is supposed to be a scientifically correct account of how things started. And I just don't see it that way. I think that evolution is a tremendously important and effective theory. I laugh when people says evolution is just a theory because gravity is also just a theory and it works, you know. But I think we should differentiate, and this is also for my fellow theists. We should differentiate between the two things. One is evolution as an account of the biological mechanisms at play for which life adapted to this planet. And the other way to look at it is as a grand theory for everything. And the second approach is particularly suited to naturalism or materialism. But the first approach, seeing evolution like what it really is, as an account, a theory that describes how life could adapt, how life could evolve to survive and to prosper in some environments. That specific way to see it is not incompatible with the believing in a creator God. Because, for example, genetic algorithms are a simplification, or what is supposed to be the mechanisms in evolution: mutation, mating, and genetic drift, selective pressure. You should know that a lot better than me. And as an engineer, I can use that to solve a problem. So there is a theological connotation to this kind of algorithms because they are used in the hands of an engineer to solve a problem. Why God couldn't have used some mechanism like that in order to in order to give life the opportunity to settle in this planet? That is a perfectly legitimate question to ask. But the way the church has reacted to this kind of scientific discoveries has led a lot of people to unbelief. I don't know if that's your case. I couldn't know. I can't know that. But I do know certain people that says, hey, those are fairy tales. The Bible is telling me that God took a little bit of mud and make man in a day. And today we know that the earth is like 4.6 billion years old. That life here has been a lot earlier than the Bible says, you know. And when you take these two things and you judge, of course, science has the winning hand. Of course, if we can verify in some way all these things, and we cannot verify scientifically the things the Bible is saying, of course, a logical mind should go to the science and say, hey, religion is just a ball of crap, excuse me. But I think we shouldn't go there. There is no need for that. Science and religion are perfectly compatible. Okay, not all kinds of religion. Because religion it can be just a way to have power. It's interesting that you mentioned Joseph Stalin just minutes ago, because I don't think that he did all those things, those bad things, because he was an atheist. I believe that he did all those things in order to protect his power. And a lot of people in the theist camp is doing and has done the same exact thing. It's not about religion or the lack of religion. It's about power. And we all humans are, I think we're not suited to be in power, because power corrupts and a lot of bad things that happen in child history because of power. So my point is that you can have it both ways. It's not like either or. You can see science the way it is supposed to be seen, as a powerful device to study the world around us, but not all valid knowledge is scientific. So you can have another source of knowledge that could be as important for you, but not necessarily that should be scientific knowledge.
Greg, what do you say about that?
Well, one, I wanted to say, I appreciate the honesty behind that. It is a much about power structure, but I wanted to get a little bit into terminology before I move on to the different kinds of knowledge. One, we've been using the term religion, and I'll apologize outright. I do tend to use the terms religion and faith interchangeably, and I know that that's not true, and I'd imagine that that's probably the same for many Christians or theists in general. I know that faith is a personal and it's your own personal interpretation, your understanding of what is God or what is out there. There's many different kinds, and religion, as William pointed out, it's that's the structure in my opinion. When I do separate the terms, the power structure or the formalized, the orthodox is what religion is. That is the nation as opposed to the individual. And religions have their governing bodies and their constituents, but every constituent can be completely different. I think that one of the worst things about religion is when it becomes more important than the individuals within it. I know one of the ways that I originally met Dr. Jones was through a group that he and I were both part of online, and I was removed from the group after criticizing somebody who asked for the group to be made private because he didn't want people at his church to know what he was saying about his universalist, very open-minded faith. He was afraid that the people within his church would be very unhappy about that and possibly shun him or otherwise deride him for simply talking about his faith. And he was not saying he's an atheist or that there's bad people. He was just saying things like you said, that he doesn't believe in hell. He doesn't believe in eternal torture. And the people that he surrounded himself with when he was in church were people that would have taken great offense to that and potentially treated him ill as such because he thought differently than they did. And I think that that's a big difference between religion and faith. Your faith is the personal side of it, and the religion is the structural part. That is a big part of why I am evangelical, is because of the religion. The faith can have some very negative results, but they tend to be smaller and more individualized, obviously, because it's happening at an individual level. Now, as to your point of the different kinds of knowledge, you used the term metaphysics earlier. I would tend to use the term philosophy.
Greg?
Yep.
Let me interrupt you. We do have several new people who are now joining us. We have several questions being sent via text, and I want to let people know who we are talking to. We're talking with Greg Brahe and Wiliam Torres, And these guys are having a marvelous discussion, and we applaud it because they have been so kind. Greg is an atheist, and Wiliam is a theist, and they are having a rational discussion with lots of kindness, and you can't beat this kind of discussion. It's wonderful, and it's
Yeah.
Don't applaud yet. I can start slinging mud still. You never know.
Okay. But the thing that I love about this, and I told my wife earlier, I said one of the things that I don't want to do, I don't want to interrupt the discussion, and many times people in my position do interrupt all the time, and I'm looking for people who want to be genuine, people who want to be honest. For instance, I really applaud Richard Dawkins' work that is in a book that he wrote concerning DNA, and also, and he spinned it this way, the gene pool and the meme pool. And that spoke volumes to me, because it's true that I don't care where you go, if you're raised in Iraq, you're going to turn out to be basically one who is a Muslim. If you're raised in the States, you're going to go with a certain kind of theology, and that has to do with our meme pool versus the gene pool. And he made some fantastic points. But you guys are really doing something that really impresses my wife and I so very much, and that's being honest and being respectful. And this is something that needs to come to the table as discussion every time. And I can't help but say, thank God, thank God. And by the way, Greg, I hated that you were kicked out of that discussion, out of that group, simply because you wanted this kind of honesty. And you're right, church people are running away from it, and that's so sad. And let me give the text number out. That is 850-572-7441. If you do have a text question or a comment or a question, please text that in. We will try to get in as many questions as possible. I've had questions coming in rapidly so far, and they want you guys to deal with, can the existence of an intelligent creator be proven? Et cetera, et cetera. And so if we can get to that, that would be wonderful. And Greg, I did interrupt you. I apologize. Keep talking, please.
Okay. I'd love to get to those questions. I think that obviously speaking to the audience is even more. And me and Wiliam can discuss things on our own as well. So, but I did want to finish with what you had asked Wiliam about metaphysics, or had said about metaphysics and about the different kinds of knowledge. I would use the term philosophy for that. You're right that there are things that science cannot answer. It questions, Sam Harris, another one of the atheist four horsemen, he did recently write a book called The Moral Landscape, which made the argument that science can be used to determine morality. I think he failed to establish fair reasoning as to how you decide on what your measures are. But once you've determined what you consider to be good and what you consider to be bad, from there the scientific method can certainly be used to determine what does the most good and what does the most bad. But the questions of what is good and what is bad is certainly not a question that science could ever answer. It's simply outside of the scope, and that is what a lot of religion, a lot of faith, and a lot of philosophy is concerned with. Morality and ethics is a very intricate and very diverse field that covers a lot of topics. I will say that when you talk about metaphysics and the existence of God, the terminology does also become important in that respect, because I've had discussions with people who believe God to be an intelligent designer that essentially created the universe with all of the mechanisms in place so that everything could play out from that point forward and stopped intervening from there on. That's a very deistic standpoint. Whereas there's people who believe that the Earth is 6,000 to 10,000 years old, that there was a great flood, a couple thousand years back. It was a couple of days from the existence of the universe to the existence of humanity. And I read actually just this morning, a friend of mine had commented on Facebook that she had seen something on TV discussing how dinosaurs were on Noah's Ark because they must have been brought on as babies.
Wow.
So that they could fit. And I mean, there's certainly a large variety of definitions of the term God. I've discussed with people who, as you mentioned, nature, basically use the term God as interchangeable with nature. They say, the beauty, the wonder, love is another one that, God is love, is one that a lot of people like to use. But they attribute more to God than simply the word love. If you're using the word God and the word love is interchangeable, then that's a God I can believe in. But if you want to start calling God a personal entity that interacts with the world and has hopes and desires and dreams, knows people individually, that's things that I don't have the evidence to accept. And with science, it's all based on a null hypothesis. If you give me an idea, I'm going to assume it's wrong until I can't. And that's the core tenet of scientific theories. I think faith is the opposite. When you're assuming things are right until something, and faith can be supported through different kinds of evidence, personal experience. I've met people who will tell me that they know absolutely that their 100% is a God because of a personal experience that they had. And to them, there can be nothing more convincing than that. But their personal experience is not an experience I had, and therefore I cannot attest to it. And it can't affect my opinion.
We were discussing chat in Facebook chat some of these things prior to the show, and I think it's okay if you don't have evidence to believe in the Creator God, then why should you? But there's a very important detail here. It's the nature of the evidence. If we're talking about scientific evidence, well, probably there's no way you would believe in God. But I'm not saying this is your case, but what I'm seeing in the new atheist movement is that people tend to conflate the term evidence with scientific evidence. And for example, sociology is not a science in the most strict definition. For example, history is not a science in this most strict definition. Linguistics, I don't know. I'm betting it's not a science in the most strict definition. But all of these areas of knowledge are valid. Why do I say they're not science? Because for any area of knowledge, area of study to be science, it has to have or comply with has to have three qualities. One is reproducibility. You have to be able to reproduce some scientist findings. The knowledge has to be unambiguous. If you assert 1 equals 1, that is the same everywhere. 1 equals 1. And also, knowledge has to have clarity, and clarity is something very related to being unambiguous. I should use an unambiguous language like mathematics, for example, to describe my findings. And if a source of knowledge that doesn't comply with these three things, when maybe not, we can call it science in the more strict definition that, for example, physics comply with. or biology or mathematics. But if we are speaking about evidence as for any valid knowledge, then I think that's perfectly logical from you not to rejecting all hypotheses until you're given adequate evidence. For example, let's say something. You could hear a voice in your head telling you, "I am God, and I want you to be. I want to be in touch with you." And maybe you say, "Hey, I'm crazy," but you go to the doctor and they test you, and you're not crazy. And certain things start to happen in your life, and you say, "Hey, without a doubt, I'm having some sort of communication with a God. What do you want from me, God?" I think that would be pretty valid evidence for you. I'm not saying that it's the way it should happen and it's going to happen, but that could be accepted as valid. But if we want to do some sort of experiment in a lab to prove whether there is or there is not a God, maybe we are in deep trouble because we can't prove that. And a lot of the arguments from the atheist camp go like, hey, 2,000 years ago, or I don't know, 5,000 years ago, we thought that lightnings were a god trying to punish people, or we thought that because the earth is in the center of the universe and the sun revolves around it, and the Bible says so, and now we know it's the other way around, and hey, the Bible is false, or there is no gods, etc., etc., etc. That's the way I see things are. They're trying to disprove your belief in the supernatural, for use a word, because some scientific predictions of your holy book are found to be incorrect. I think that's not the way we're supposed to go. Another important thing is that the God I believe in is mostly synonymous with love. The Bible says that God is love. We have no empirical evidence to say there is a God with a long white beard in the skies that causes everything to be. That's the truth. We have no such evidence. But we have interesting things. For example, I was seeing a picture that this friend of mine in Facebook shared with me. This picture had a word on it and different faiths, and there was a particular truth that was present in all of these faiths, maybe 10, 12 faiths around the world. For example, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Jainism, Confucianism, and another phrase I don't remember, is that the ethic of reciprocity. Do unto others what you want others done unto you. And that is love. And that's the central tenet of Jesus Christ's teachings. If you want to be perfect, as your Father in the sky, in heaven, do unto others good, because your Father do good to everyone, whether they are righteous or not righteous. So be perfect as Him. Of course, we are not good examples of that. I don't think I can name myself as hey, I'm an example, I'm very Christ-like, and you can learn from me. But the fact that this truth is present in faiths around the world makes me think. The fact that every culture in the world has this sense of the supernatural, and the sense of morality being attached to that sense of the supernatural makes me think. Also, the fact that nature is intelligible by mathematics, using mathematics, for example, makes me think. The fact that actually there is no evolutionary, well, none that satisfies me, evolutionary account for spirituality. It doesn't seem to be a trait that favors some species to be dominant, or I don't know, to adapt better to the environment. That makes me think. Why is the sense of spirituality there? That makes me think. And when I take all of these things, I know that I don't have scientific proof, but what I have is a reason to open my heart and wonder there is something else that I can see or hear. Maybe my existence is not a cause of a random fluctuation in quantum space. Maybe I'm not an accident. Maybe I was planned to be here, and God or whatever that creates me has a plan with me. I don't know. Could be. It's not scientific, but surely makes me wonder, and I can open my heart because of that. Also, we can see God. Okay, we can see it. We can't hear it. It appears that what we can, in some way, see or experience is the only thing that is real. Yeah, but in the Bible, there's this account, this story that Jesus talks about this guy who had some servants, and this guy goes away, and he doesn't return soon. And the servants that were into his house start to. I'm trying to do the best I can because my English is not that good. Okay, so I expect you to bear with me. The guys that are left in home start to mistreat the other servants because they say into their hearts, my master is not coming, so I can do whatever I want. What I see is that the fact that God is not, we're not able to hear a voice in the sky that says, hey, I am your God. You should have no doubt that I'm your God and I created you. That very fact exposes the true nature in our hearts. And that's not only for the atheists, that is also for us, the theists. Because religion, or I agree with your definition, with the difference between faith and religion, but let's use a religion as a word for the two things for a moment. Religion is a very effective way to control people. So when, for example, I'm a pastor in a church, I can use that for my own benefit, or I can use that position to help others, and the choice is mine. And because God is not with this whip, like giving me, like punching me or something, I can do what my heart dictates me to do. And that expose my nature as the absence of the master of the house expose the true nature of the butler heart. I don't know if I'm communicating. So, what I'm trying to say is that maybe there's a purpose behind God being hidden. There's this notion that's called God as absconditus, which means God hidden. but I think God is hidden in plain sight. That's the way I see things, because I can see God in every child. I can see God where people helping others. I can see God when somebody gives what they do not have to others. I can see God in all of these things. So for me, God is hidden but in plain sight. And maybe there's a reason for that. And maybe if you want to grow as a loving, kind people, spiritual people, maybe that's the way it should be.
William, we're going to give Greg an opportunity to address some of the things you just said, and then we're going to go to some questions.
Sure, go ahead, Greg.
Okay. Thank you. That's an awesome explanation of your understanding of God, and it does help make clear. And I know I mentioned, or William mentioned earlier, that we had discussed a few things ahead of time on Facebook. We tried to keep it brief intentionally, so we didn't know too much about one another. So that helps to give me insight as well. But I can say that I see the same things. As I mentioned before, if you want to describe God as love, and make it a complete synonym, interchangeable, that's a God I can believe in. That's a God I'd even be willing to worship. I am willing to put or to sacrifice for the sake of love, and that's because of love. So it's self-evident. It becomes what it is. But when a God is generally defined as far more than just love. Even just your love, compassion, and the things that come from love, kindness. And I personally, you mentioned the not having an evolutionary background for that. I don't have time to get into where that comes from, but Michael Shermer is a fantastic author on that subject. He talked about social mechanisms, why people do or believe weird things, why people help one another. He writes at a very approachable level. But when it comes to, I did want to address your points on history, sociology, linguistics, and science. I know some historians, sociologists, and linguists that would probably disagree to an extent. I think that it is true that many things are not absolutely 100% scientific in the general understanding of the term. History relies on science. If I want to claim that George Washington was not actually the first president of the United States, there's going to be some pretty hefty burden of proof on my part for that. There's a lot of evidence to say that he was indeed, and it is reproducible and it is testable because we have primary accounts, primary documents from the time that we can examine independently. So you and I could both read the same documents or even a random sampling of different documents and come to the same conclusion. That's a scientific process of determining the truth. The same applies to sociology. There is such a thing as a non-scientific poll versus a scientific poll or survey. I think that most news agencies are guilty of doing the non-scientific ones just as frequently as their scientific ones and publicizing the non-scientific ones a lot more. For example, if they put a survey up on their website that only the people who go to that website for that particular news station are the ones taking, they're going to get some biased results, and that's something that science can demonstrate. But when we talk about the subject of faith as something outside of science and beyond science, it's love. I can have faith in love. I cannot prove that I love anybody. That's not something that anybody loves anybody, or that love even exists. But there is a set sort of a category of behaviors and actions and feelings that go hand in hand with love. I would have a hard time believing that a father loves his children if he's beating them on a regular basis and burning them with cigarettes and locking them in a dog cage. That's not my definition of love. There is still evidence for that, or against it, and it is still testable. But on the subject of God, as you mentioned yourself, hidden and not testable, not observable in any way. The idea comes that there's no way to say that there's no way to say that there is no God. I will absolutely 100% admit that. There is not a way for me to say absolutely there is not a God and I can prove it. Until you start defining what you mean by God. If you want to say that there is a God and that God created the earth yesterday through a process that is completely not consistent with what science tells me, I can prove scientifically. Now, if you want to reject science, so be it. But there's also no way to prove that everything wasn't created 10 minutes ago, including our memories of everything that's happened before and the age and evidence contained within everything. So, we can get into the philosophy of solipsism and things of that nature, but might as well just watch the movie The Matrix to get that. There's no way to prove that we're not trapped inside of a matrix and just being used as fuel for machines either.
Greg,
I still will just go by my faith in what I see and can observe as what actually does exist.
we have several questions that have come in, and I want to see if we can get these addressed before our show is over. One question is, doesn't your ability or non-ability to prove love depend on your definition of love? For example, can't love be proven as defined by Paul?
What was the very last part of that?
Okay, let me read the entire thing. Doesn't your ability or non-ability to prove love depend on your definition of love? For example, can't love be proven as defined by Paul?
As defined by Paul, that's what I'm not understanding of that question.
In 1 Corinthians.
Paul the Apostle?
Oh, sure. Okay,
Yes.
that I'm following now.
Love equals.
Love is gentle. Love is
Yes.
kind. In that one, I would say yes. If that is a set definition of love, just as I had mentioned that if you define what God is, I can tell you whether that's a God we can prove or not. It's once we have sufficient definition, things can become testable, and love, by the definition of Paul from 1 Corinthians, does indeed offer itself up to testability to an extent. There's plenty of things in 1 Corinthians that love is not boastful. I'm pretty sure that at some point in every relationship, be it parent and child, friendship, or a romantic relationship, somebody gets boastful at some point. Does that mean that they don't love the other person? I'd say no. I'd say it means that we're imperfect, we're human. But if you put a very strict definition on anything like that, and then you give it enough time, as a matter of human nature, it will very likely be proved to not be true. So love is something that has to be a little bit ambiguous. It has to be general anyways.
About 30 minutes ago, you were talking about faith, and I wanted to ask this question, and this question comes from me. The Apostle Paul deals with this term faith, or better put in the Greek, pistis. I'm not convinced that our modern usage of faith is accurate or adequate. I understand that religious people use faith in various ways. However, with that said, the Apostle Paul used pistis in this context. He said, whatsoever is not of pistis is wrong. What he meant in Greek by pistis is whatever is not a body of truth. That is, that which isn't truth itself is wrong. And so in a sense, Paul is in much agreement with you. If you have truth, that's good. If you don't, you have wrong. And so if it's true that Paul was moving forward, that is, in his concept of his kind of theology because he's very transitional. He comes out of Judaism, which was one form of theology, and he actually writes about moving from one faith to another faith. And this faith that he talks about in the Greek text is a rational faith. And this is why he talks about whatsoever is not a part of this body of truth or this pistis, it's not right. Would you agree with Paul's statement if, in fact, that is true?
I think it'd be a difficult statement to disagree with. I mean, by the very general concept of what is not true is therefore false, seems like a simple logical syllogism by definition. So I'm not sure I followed entirely what the question meant.
I guess my point is religion has given us much in the context of meta-language. For instance, we have the evolution of terms. And what the idea of pistis meant to the Apostle Paul has changed in various ways over the last 2,000 years. And so when we look at, and this is why I think that Dawkins and Sam Harris and the rest of these guys need to look at what these authors actually said instead of looking at what is being spinned by various religious entities. And so my point is, when the Apostle Paul talked about faith, it wasn't a system of trust. It wasn't a system of, like, this is my faith that I'm following, and it's something that cannot be proven. But Paul was moving forward more into a context of saying this is something that we know for certain. And so my question is simply this: if Paul was moving in that direction, and I'm not saying that his theology or his rhetoric was complete, but would you agree that that's a good step forward for the Apostle Paul?
I'd say that that's a step in the right direction, most certainly. Redefinition of terms, but what is important is, terms, language has power in its meaning, both in its true meaning and its generally accepted meaning. So with your understanding of language, I'm sure is very, very different from most people's understanding of it. By you and I to accept that definition of what the Apostle Paul meant at that time, was intending to convey, and how that may have changed, that only becomes significant when that becomes the consensus, the generally accepted understanding of that term. Until that point, if we use it, if we use the term faith to mean that, and other people don't yet, and we don't qualify and explain, we're simply going to add to confusion. And I think that's where a lot of religious confusions and schisms and divergence does come from, as well as simple miscommunication and language barriers as well.
See, when you look at the Hebrew text and also your Greek text, you see that you have people in transition like we all are. We're on this journey of learning. And so when you look at the Old Covenant and those people speaking, it's not necessarily true that any of it was true, but they had concepts. And in the case of the Hebrew text, it's extremely poor because it's a writing system that we call an abjad. It's simply consonantal, and it's very much guesswork. There is no accurate text, and for us to make an accuracy argument about anything stated in the Old Testament would not be logical, number one, nor reasonable to do so if we are to be completely honest about the language of the text and what it says. But by the time that we get to the New Testament, one of the things that's really clear is that these writers of the Bible no longer want to use this abstract system of writing, but they start using something that's very accurate, and that would be the Greek language, something that does define well many different kinds of pericope. And my point is, why would any of these people come from a language that is of Aramaic and Hebrew, and their writing system that's quite ambiguous, something that has a creative process, something that is loose, very interpretive? if what these people are trying to do is quite inventive, why would they start writing in a different writing system, in a style that's completely an accuracy-based modeled writing system? Why would they have this huge paradigm shift? Because Jesus wasn't speaking in Greek. He was speaking in Aramaic and also in Hebrew, and yet the New Testament writers are writing in Greek to make sure that we can accurately understand. And this is something that we have to look at. I mean, if they were trying to play dodgeball with what was being stated, why did they do so? And can't we give them enough room for their transition? That is, that movement, that is moving forward, seeing the complexities and seeing that they were wrong. And Paul the Apostle, he actually confesses to the wrongs of his past theology, and he uses it in juxtaposition. And so I guess that I'm asking a lot of questions here, and maybe I'm rattling, but I'm simply saying, wow, what if we could look at the Bible not through the lens of religion? What if we could honestly look at the text for what it actually is, number one, and how these people were growing just as we are today?
I think that would be a marvelous thing. I think that's asking one of the greatest feats of reconstruction since, language existed in the first place, since it first originated. It's a very difficult question to get everybody to start reinterpreting everything that they've ever known, and looking at things. Especially, I mean, the Christian world is far more likely to be resistant to that, because it's a complete overturning of worldview. But it'd be fantastic if we could get everybody to set aside the dogma and the things that they have been taught, and to take a critical look at things, given source criticisms and textual criticisms. Look at things from the linguistic standpoint and try to figure out what people were actually saying. As I mentioned before, there is still the pressure of time, that nobody has the time to put everything into. I will never in my life know as much about Greek or ancient Hebrew as you do, and I'm okay with that. I do hope to increase my knowledge on the subject, but I think a lot of the value and the wealth of human knowledge comes from the diversity within it, and we do have to trust our experts. And unfortunately, there's no way for us to be, as lay people, to be absolutely sure on who are the right experts and who are the wrong ones.
I agree.
So even for you to come up with these very well-reasoned responses and or criticisms of the current interpretation of the Bible, you've got a long road ahead of you in convincing other people to accept your conclusions, your criticisms, and your interpretations of that, even as the expert on the subject that you are.
Well, I do appreciate that. One person just sent in a text message. He states, Greg, you do not sound like an evangelical atheist. You sound like a very objective scientist.
Thank you.
He sounds like an agnostic more than an atheist.
That's another terminology question. Do you mind if I do want to launch in just a second, because I'm not a fan of the term agnostic, in the use of I am an agnostic versus an atheist. And I'm sure Dr. Jones can assist me with the Greek on this one, but the root word, it's Gnos, correct? Nos?
Right.
That is, it refers to knowledge. And it's an epistemological question of what can be known. As an agnostic, you're taking the stance that something cannot be known. It cannot be known absolutely. And there's degrees of agnosticism. As a scientist, you can never know something is absolutely true, but you can be pretty certain of it, and you can be pretty well convinced that there's no way that something can be true as well. We do, the scientific process is a method of ruling things out. The one thing that we do claim knowledge on is that something cannot be the case. It could turn out to be false at some point down the road, but often, all of science relies on the assumption that the rules aren't going to change. If I pick up a book and I drop it today, it's going to fall. And if I do the same thing tomorrow, it's also going to fall. If suddenly it went up to the ceiling, we'd have a huge paradigm shift in science. But as an atheist, I do not believe that there are any gods. I'm an atheist in regards to the Christian God, which is the same general God as the Muslims and the Jews have. And I don't believe in any of the Hindu gods, don't believe in any of the Greek or Roman gods, any of the Norse gods. I don't believe in any gods. There's a quote by, I believe it's Stephen Roberts, who says, I don't remember the full quote, but essentially, I contend that I am an atheist, or that you're as much of an atheist as I am, with one exception. When you can explain to me why you disbelieve in all other gods but your own, you'll understand why I also reject yours. And I think that most people do disbelieve in plenty of gods. I just simply disbelieve in all of them. And that's what makes me an atheist. I don't believe in any gods. I don't have an active belief, but I'm also an agnostic in that I don't claim I can prove that. And I think that most Christians or most religious people are also agnostic. There was a group of early Christians that were Gnostics. They claimed absolute knowledge and absolute proof of things. And there's still plenty of people around today that say they know that there is a God, and they know that that God is the God of the Bible, and they know that the Bible is the absolute literal word of God in every way, and the translation that they're using of it is absolutely the correct translation, and they know that they understand everything in it perfectly. That would be a Gnostic Christian theist.
Right.
For most Christians, I think that they're a little less certain than that. So the term agnostic just means that you're not sure of everything that you're claiming, in general, it means that you're not sure of anything that you're claiming.
Greg, let me. We are running out of time, and I want to get a couple of more questions in. Before the days in which flat Earth science turned into a different kind of science altogether, people were ignoring what Aristotle had argued concerning the Earth. And it's simply because people were not thinking. After the days of flat Earth science, we've entered into a different kind of science. Scholars in the flat Earth science days had an orthodoxy. And within that paradigm of orthodoxy, they were very limited in their understanding of the cosmos, and I think you would agree with that. Since then, that orthodoxy has changed dramatically, and I think you would also agree with that. Could it be true that the orthodoxy of science as we know it now will augment or change significantly over the next 10 to 20 years?
I would say I'd hope that there's going to be some major changes over the next 10 to 20 years, and even more changes over the next 100 or so.
I mean, I'm simply trying to say we have seen so many different shifts, and we keep making forward movements. Is it rational to say I'm ruling out all possibilities of something or an entity called God? Is that good?
I would say no. That's why I consider myself to be an agnostic atheist and not a Gnostic atheist. I don't claim that there's a way for me to prove that there is no God. But on the scale of certainty that I mentioned before, there's also no way that I can prove that my wife loves me. But I'm pretty certain that that's the case, and I'm happy to act on that judgment, and to risk my future and my life on that judgment, as I've made that plunge in that guy. I've also made that plunge in my life, and I guess I'm certain enough to risk that if there are some people who are correct and there is not only a God, but that God is a vengeful and scornful God who's extremely jealous about people who don't believe in him, and I'm going to be thrown into a lake of fire for eternity, so be it. That's not a God I would worship anyway, so
I don't blame you.
Well, he doesn't exist. He does not exist.
You know, one of the things that I really applaud Christopher Hitchens in doing well, he would bring up things like taking people out and stoning them because they were burning firewood on the Sabbath. He would bring up things like, here's a young lady, she's a virgin, she gets raped, and someone's paying 50 shekels to her father, and she has to marry the rapist. Those are found in our current translations of the Bible. Those are very immoral stories. It's sad that we have the doctrines of infanticide, genocide, and slavery found throughout the Scripture, and yet we find people applauding these very doctrines. We even had a priest on this last week who said, in fact, that he agreed with the doctrines of infanticide, genocide, and slavery, and he would even, if God told him to kill infants, he would do so also. And I find that to be extremely troubling, and I can applaud your morality in this case and your objectivity. And I think religion is extremely poor, and I would encourage everyone to run away from religion. However, I am a theist, and I do see some proof, but it's not something that I can prove in 5 minutes or even 3 or 4 hours. It takes much discussion. And it's discussions like this that really gets the ball rolling, and your intellectual honesty. And I love the way that you put your hand up and showed us your ring, because it indicates that you really have a love for your wife. And wow, people need to look at atheists in a real way. We have some wonderful atheists out there who are so honest, full of love, good people who are so moral, so ethical, doing wonderful things. And I applaud that about you and many of our other atheists. And I'm so thankful for your heart, William. You've been so kind tonight. Your heart and passion, your objectivity has been wonderful. So I'm going to give you guys about 10 minutes to get after a hot topic subject that you guys can talk about. And so I'm going to allow Greg just to introduce the topic, and you guys go back and forth for about 10 minutes, would you?
You want me to come up with my own hot topic subject?
Yeah, go for it. Something that you really wanted to say tonight that you haven't been able to say. And also, William, just before we end, I want you to say something that you haven't been able to say tonight that you really wanted to say.
All right. The one thing that's been getting at me here is because I'm all about the scientific method, it's all about, again, the null hypothesis and the concept of disproof. And one thing that is extremely frustrating about arguing with people about faith is that they say, well, it's faith. I take it on faith. I believe it. And there's nothing that can take that away from me. So what I want to ask William, and if we have time, you, Dr. Jones, or anybody else who'd like to participate, what the if there is anything that could disprove your faith, if there's anything that could happen that could make you say, no, maybe that's not true, what kind of evidence would that take?
Well, that's a question I've heard before, and I'm not sure I can answer that. I know that intelligent people have an answer for that particular question, but I don't think I have one. Maybe, well, we always say that the only way to be certain if there's a God or not is if there's an afterlife. And if there's an afterlife, okay, I die, then I wake up some sort of entity, I don't know, and I could say to myself, hey, there's a God after all. But is there no afterlife? I have no way to know, because I'm already dead. I'm not conscious, you know? So, but right now, what could happen to make me not believe in a God, or maybe believe there's no God? Honestly, after all I've seen and experienced, I don't know. I don't know for certain what could happen to make me not believe. And I don't know how that sounds, but that's just the way it is with me.
Hey, I tell you what, that's wonderful, William. And I think that you pointed that question at me. Is that correct, Greg?
Yeah, that was pointed at both of you, if you could.
Okay. What could destroy my faith? I think that my faith has been destroyed several times. I was not raised in the context of how I now think. I was raised to believe that Jesus died for my sins and took away my sins, and at some point in my lifetime he would come back in this rapture, and I would be caught up in the sky, and I would leave the rest of these unbelievers, including you atheists, behind, and Jesus was going to somehow burn you, and the judgment would come, and the rest of you guys who do not believe in sweet Jesus would burn forever. And I'm thankful that that kind of faith in me was destroyed, because I was hateful. I was full of self-righteousness, and that used to be me. But one day my faith was challenged, and I'm thankful that my faith was just not challenged in some parts, but it was challenged in every part. And so I went to the original text, and I stayed there. And it was in the text itself and how it was put together. And this is why I have a book coming out in about a year and a half on proof. And it has proof of why we should believe not all of Scripture, but some of Scripture. Because there are linguistic methods, that is, because linguistics, that would be linguistic science. There are methods and practices within the linguistic fields that we can prove that God has actually said something, and we are going to present these particular facts in this particular book. This is a book that's been ongoing in relationship with a translation model that I've been working on for over 20 years. And it's not dealing with synthetic models of translation theory. It's dealing with the evidence of a fluency model, which has never been done. And so I do think that when dealing with the evidence of the text that we do have, it's far superior to anything that humans have been able to do thus far. And this was done back in the first century, and this is very challenging. But the proof is not something that I can put together in 5 minutes in a spin on this particular program. But I think that you would have to destroy all the evidence for me to shake my faith at this point, because I see much linguistic evidence that is to support God. And I think that the church has been playing cat and mouse for too long. They have used a system of pretending and calling it faith. And I agree with you, Greg, that pretending and calling it faith is wrong. I think we do need evidence. I think we need proof. And I think we need people who can adequately do something like prove it. And so when I ask people to prove that God said X, Y, and Z, and they can't, I question whether they... I mean, why buy into a canon is my point. Why buy into God said X, Y, or Z if you have no proof? And this is something that I want to see radically changed. There's a difference between what man said God said and what God actually said. And this is something that we do need to put on the table for discussion. And so I can't give a total answer to it, but I'm simply claiming that my faith was destroyed. But the faith that I do have now, it's not that of pretending. It's based upon evidence that I think that I can see objectively. And I'm going to put this model up for debate when I do publish. And it's going to be a working model. And wherever it's wrong, I hope someone picks it apart. And so I hope that answers part of your question.
you that did. To an extent. I mean, I won't know more until I get your. I get my autographed copy of your book.
Oh, I will give it to you. You know,
I want mine too.
yeah. I mean, it's. I mean, there are. You know, if the scripture's true, Jesus left many convincing proofs, and if he did, we should be able to see them. And I'm simply saying that just as easy as it is to measure the distance between stars, a place that we've never been, if we will use our minds, we can come up with methods and practices that are good and sane and rational, that we can prove that God actually has spoken to humanity. And I love the analogy that you used a few minutes ago, Greg. I can't prove that my wife talks to me or has said X, Y, and Z to me, but it's a living reality. But at some point, science is going to have the ability to prove those conversations. But this is why I keep saying that our models of scientific proof, they're very infantile right now, but they're growing. We're becoming better in our scientific discovery and exploration, and this is wonderful. And so I would hate to park my mind and draw the conclusion there is no God right now, because we don't have the ability, that is, to do science well enough to come to those hardball conclusions, I don't think. It's just my opinion.
William, do you have a question you want to get at?
I wanted to say something about history. You said that we can use scientific methods to for example, take a sample from books that refer to a specific historical event, and that's true. And I can reproduce your findings if you state them in a very unambiguous way. I can do that. What I cannot do, and that's the reason why I maintain that history is not a science in the sense that, for example, physics is science, is that I cannot recreate the historical event itself. Again, I can use science to study those sources that point to that specific event, but I cannot recreate the event itself. So that's what I'm maintaining. It's not a science, the same way or sense that, for example, physics is. About the Gnostic, you talk about Gnostic Christians. My understanding of the issue is the following. When you say gnosis or Gnostic, you're not talking about a certainty, or claiming to be certain of some knowledge. What you're claiming is that there is some special knowledge that's being given to you and just you, something like a hidden cult or a sect that a cult is the English word, a cult. But it is a cult where not everyone can get into. There's like I have my followers that follow me from the distance, and then I have my followers that are initiated to some sort of a special knowledge, and just them know that. That's what we understand for Gnostic Christians. Gnostics, they maintain that Jesus had a special revelation for some selected few, and that revelation is not attainable for laymen. That's what we understand. And I think that you can prove you love your wife. I'm pretty certain you can. You can show me. You showed me your ring, and I think that love is some sort of mental disorder because because you're like the person has not to be a good person. The person has not to love you back. The person has not to be even pretty. You just love the person, and the fact that you are sharing your life, and no one forced you to put a gun in your head to marry your wife, that tells me that you love her. You maybe you two are not perfect. You have argue about things, but You still love her. Maybe you can't prove it scientifically. Maybe I can not design an experiment, for example, to quantify variance. I don't know, any scientific thing. I can not set up that kind of thing. So it's not a scientific proof, but it's a proof. And I think that we all admit that kind of proof, maybe not in a peer-reviewed journal, scientific journal, but in our everyday lives, we accept that kind of proof. If I trust you, if you are, for example, my friend from high school, and 13 years later you tell me something, maybe I haven't seen that thing you claiming you saw, for example, but I believe in you because I trust you, and that's okay. For example, you said to me, hey, please, I need you to lend me some money. Do I know are you going to pay me back? I don't know that, but I trust you. And acting with this trust in my mind, I lend you the money. And finally, I want to share with you this quote by John Lennox that says something like this. Faith is not a leap in the dark. It is the exact opposite. It's a commitment based on evidence. It is irrational to reduce all faith to blind faith and then subject it to ridicule. That provides a very anti-intellectual and convenient way of avoiding intelligent discussion. Thank God Greg does not do this, but I have to say that some people do, and I have to say that all faith is not blind faith. For example, there was something in my life that made me believe, or something that I judged it was enough for turning me into a believer, for example. And because of that evidence I've seen, then I commit to the conclusions I've arrived because of that evidence. Commit to a way of life, commit to a set of beliefs, for example. But it's not just a leap in the dark, because I don't think that's the way God acts. God gives you something you can sink your teeth on. I think that's true for every believer. And so it's not always blind faith. I think faith maybe is not scientific, but it's valid. I think you have faith in love. I have faith in love, but for me, God is love, but also a sentient being, for example. But as the truth is that we all have faith in something, in love or in anything, but we all have faith. That's what I want to say.
I do thank you
job.
for making those comments. Those were powerful, very powerful.
Thank you both.
Thank you both. I don't want to leave Greg without making a final statement, also some kind of conclusion, and then I want to state just a couple of words before we're going out. And my wife and I would just love to have you guys back on. I mean, this is wonderful. It's a breath of fresh air. Two people who can get together and honestly talk about the differences of theism, variants on ideas of science, and this is a discussion that needs to continue. So, Greg, give us some words that would really encourage us to go in a better direction toward truth.
The words that I live my life by are question everything. I went to when I went through the RCIA program, which is the Rite of Christian Initiation for adults, that's the Becoming Catholic class, basically. I would spend over an hour. I mean, the classes were an hour at a time, and I'd usually spend an hour and a half or more after class having discussions with a fantastic Norbertine priest who was very open-minded and very good at explaining things. We had some marvelous discussions that you won't ever get if you just let people talk and don't ask any questions.
Yeah.
And if you take things by trust alone. So I say, ask questions, seek knowledge, And if you see something or you hear something that you don't feel is right, say something about it, do something about it, take the risks, and get out there or put yourself out there. Me and William didn't end up on this show today because we sat in our living rooms and read the Bible on our own, and came to some conclusions and never talked about them. But I'm sure we both accepted the invitation to be on this show because we were hoping that by talking about these things, we could possibly, maybe, hopefully, make some small difference somewhere, greater than ourselves. And I think that that can only happen by reaching out there. So thank you for having me on the show and giving me the opportunity to do this. I did want to make one quick plug on the way out, is that I do run a Facebook group. If anybody's interested in further discussions with me, I am happy to do that. The group is run by me and two of my very close friends. It does get into politics quite a bit, so if you're not comfortable with that, I understand, but I invite you to check us out. It is Inspiring Doubt is the name of the group, and that is both our goal and our purpose, not only to inspire doubt in others, but hoping that our doubt can be an inspiration in some way, shape, or form. It does tend to devolve frequently into political debates between me and my best friend, who is absolutely 100% diametrically opposed to me on that, but we both do agree that skepticism is the approach that should be taken, and we would love to get some more theists and more people that have an alternate opinion, be willing to talk about it. So please check us out.
Yeah, make sure that you friend Greg on Facebook. Get involved with his discussion group. That's very important to do. William, we want to give you a chance to say something for about 1 minute. We are very limited in time here, so I just want you to let people know your heart real quick, and like Greg did, and just tell the people something that they need to hear.
First of all, I would like to thank you, Dr. Jones, and thank Greg for this wonderful time of discussion. This proves a thing that is perfectly possible to discuss things with a civilized attitude. And from my standpoint as a Christian, I think that love is everything. If we don't love, well, we're doing nothing. If we cannot serve others, then we are doing nothing. If our words are not helping people, we are doing nothing. And if we cannot channel God's love to everyone, independent of what are their beliefs, then we are doing nothing. We can think different, but we're humans. We're here for something. Let's discover what it's all about.
Well
Thank
said.
you very much.
Well said.
Thank you so much, William.
Thank you both.
I would like to state this, and then I want my wife to close out. I'm so thankful, and I should say we are so thankful for atheist Sam Harris. He's doing a wonderful job making my life easier as a linguist. He really is. Richard Dawkins, even though I question his ideas of coming over into another discipline that he knows nothing about, I'm thankful that he's bringing question and this idea of chat to the table of discussion everywhere. And this discussion, this table needs to be global. It doesn't need to be just on our show. It needs to be everywhere. And this is something that's really wonderful about the atheist and the agnostics and the Gnostics and the theists coming together, talking. And this couldn't have been done years ago. We were just too prejudiced, too biased to do so. And now it seems like people are talking everywhere. And I want to encourage people, keep talking, keep talking, keep talking. The discussion is wonderful. Learn to be kind when you talk. Learn how to respect one another and just, listen a while. And I think we can go there. And honey, it's wonderful to have you next to me in this show. And so I want you to end this for us.
All right. Well, thank you both. And if you're like me, I'm sure that out of each individual that was here tonight, William and Greg, that you had some common denominator with both of them. And
Right.
you probably thought maybe you wouldn't when you first tuned in. But I can say that truthfully, Greg said some things that I certainly agree with, and obviously Wiliam did, and Wiliam did. And it's good to come together with our differences. We learn from each other. And Greg, you're so right. Question. And we certainly agree with that. And Wiliam, you're so right. Love is everything. And so I just want to thank you for enriching our lives. And everybody try to friend both of them, Greg Brahe and Wiliam Torres, on Facebook, and you can really continue the discussion. We're so thankful to be alive in this time where we can have technology to bring us all together. And you'd never guess a guy from Wisconsin, a guy from Columbia, and some rednecks here in Pensacola, Florida, could get together tonight and enjoy each other. So that's it.
Thank you for your time. We love you guys.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Very much appreciated. you.